suggest we get started.
Okay.
So welcome back to those of you who've been with us before for our mental fitness sessions, and welcome if this is your first seminar that you're doing with us on this important topic. I'm delighted as always to be joined by our expert speaker, Ross McWilliam from Mindset Pro. I'm Jenny Pelling, I'm the Apprenticeship Partnerships Director at Kaplan, and we're running these strengthening mental fitness sessions as part of our personal development programme. So delighted that this is the fourth one in the series, and we're looking at a balancing act. I'm going to hand over to Ross. Please, by the way, do put messages in the chat whenever you want, and I'll be tracking that for Ross as we go through.
Thank you, Jenny, and thank you everybody else for donating your time today. I know it's difficult and people are busy and it's that time of year, so I do appreciate that. I'll hopefully make it worth your while. So let's press on. We've got a lot to get through today. You know, as Jenny said, it's a balancing act, you know, a mental fitness. And you know, even I've done stuff in the past where I'm strengthening my mental fitness and I'm actually weakening it, and I'll allude to that today. We'll also look at a guy called Jeff Bezos, and all I'll say before I put my next slide on is that I think he still is the richest man in the world. So if he sort of talks about something, I'll tend to listen a little bit. And he has a phrase, work-life harmony, rather than work-life balance. And I'll come on to that again very shortly. So that's Jeff Bezos. We'll look at his metaphor, which I just mentioned. I can win at work and win at home. I like that one. Some little questions or work performance indicators. Have you got that harmony right? Okay, so you'll be able to find that out today and become more aware of what to do to make it better. And then we'll finish off with some practical study techniques, which they're always useful, and we'll probably do some more of these in the new year as well. As always, I always have a group agreement. If we're doing anything you feel a bit unsteady, unsure, and it's tweaked something in you emotionally, then please, you know, give us a quick message. I need to take a break, or this group agreement also means to ask you questions at any point in time, not to feel that you are left out of something. We want to include everybody, and that's the way I try to operate in life. So, you know, we want to make you feel safe and secure that you can learn. Because when you're happy or happier, they know the dopamine in our brains that helps us just learn is flowing better. So therefore learning becomes easier. So a balancing act. It is a balancing act, and it's not exponential. The older you get, the better you get at it. Sometimes it can be the opposite. But it's find that right balance for you in your particular part of your life. We can overdose on the good stuff, and sometimes more doesn't mean better. And it's a really simple phrase that, but it resonates with me. We can exert so much willpower, denying ourselves something and depleting our enjoyment of something, that we can run out of steam. And I think this two of the culprits for this are achievement orientation, which is generally established when we're younger, to go and achieve, to pass qualifications, to get a job, to buy a house, which is fine. But it can drive us, but it can drive us into a wall if we don't watch it. And the other friend, resilience, that ability to keep pushing, but also to be adaptable. And I always say there's always a caveat, a negative to resilience, that we can be too resilient, especially if it's linked to achievement, and we can wear ourselves out. So that balancing act doesn't occur. You can also see this in exercise. And I'm a culprit for this. Doing too much frequency, intensity, and duration, we call that the FID equation. Frequency, intensity, and duration of exercise, we know it's good for us. We know it's good for our physical health, our physiological health, our psychological or emotional health. But those frequency, intensity, and duration variables, we can really run into some problems with that. So exercise then can actually work against us. And it's understanding this awareness I mentioned at the start for ourselves in our personal and professional lives when we've got this balance right. Another examples are sleeping, drinking, smoking, social media. Yeah, too much social media. We know from research that when we scroll too much, it can make us feel less empowered and a bit more negative than when we post something. And other things underneath there that are related to, I suppose, achievement orientation. So let's just get that right up there, the balancing act to start with. Okay, this is Jeff Bezos, a mutually inclusive approach, a work-life harmony. Doesn't like the balance bit. The balance bit thinks because you have balance, you win on one side of this seesaw, but you lose on the other. So he doesn't like that phrase. And he wants it to be mutually inclusive. One fuels the other, like a symbiotic situation, where when one gets better, the other one gets better and pulled up as well. So I think it's an interesting metaphor, and it's something that I try and do, nothing at the expense of, because we can wear ourselves out like that. So try and be productive and happy and efficacious at work, and then that will happen to be a natural overflow at home as well. And the two scenarios will fuel each other, and that's where we need to go. And people say when they're in the best jobs and the best parts of lives, nothing feels like any effort, nothing feels like work, so you enjoy it that much. And we do know, broadly speaking, when we enjoy something, we tend to perform better. Yeah. Another guy called Stephen Covey, you've probably heard of this guy, talks about a win-win situation, this win at work, win at life. And he said, effective people, this is a classic habit of effective people. If you look at this little diagram now, you'll see that number 4, win-win, is slap bang in the middle. If you want to be effective at whatever you're doing, then you've got to think how I can win at home, win at work, or win with other people, so nobody loses. And it's not about beating somebody, it's taking people with you. And if you ever get some higher positions in management, it's about pulling people towards you on a common goal rather than isolating them and making them feel that they're not part of the group. So always have this win-win in mind. And this is what Jeff Bezos talks about. So awareness, okay, we mentioned this briefly already, being aware when we're in or out of balance. At this very moment in time, do you feel in or out of balance? Do you feel a bit pressured or overworked or stressed because of the time of year? Relationship, work pressures, expectations, personal, professional. Just being aware when you feel a bit out of kilter. It's very powerful tool indeed. And again, Jeff Bezos talks about another really interesting term, protective proactivity. Being able to keep in balance or equilibrium before the imbalance occurs. So it's like driving down a road and you maybe see a car crash in front of you, so you slow down, then you go around the crash and carry on with your journey. It's that sort of preemptive and proactive approach that will see you get better rewards, whatever those rewards might be for you. So proactive, protective, preempting, keywords. The opposite of that is volatile reactivity. When something happens, people then are very volatile, very impulsive, and it's not always the best response or reaction to a situation. And there's many examples of this where people, for instance, might lose their temper, or people put some work in poorly. They know it's poorly, but they still do it because they're responding and reacting to something. And they're not in control. And I think all top professionals have a measure of control. They've got a measure of being ad lib and taking things on the hoof, but there's a lot of preparation beneath that. And that preparation comes out in that protective proactivity. So, we've just described briefly those two, proactive proactivity and volatile reactivity. Which one are you now? Do you want to put that in the chat box? I'm not forcing you, but if you wanted to be honest and do that, you can do. I'll be very honest with you. I used to be very reactive. Yeah. And it's only, again, I'm not consistently 100% with this, but many times now I'm more proactive when the body starts telling me, when I'm feeling a bit too bunched up, when I've got too much work on at times. I like it, but I know the reaction is not a nice reaction from me. I'll still be professional, but it has a residue on me. So it's all about balance for me now in my life. It really is.
Ross, we're getting, just so you know, we're getting actually probably more reactives and a sprinkling of proactives and boths.
Yeah, and I think that's nice. That first of all, congratulate you on your honesty. Some people would say vulnerability, but I think vulnerability is great. Being able to do that with everybody here and say, you know what, I'm reactive, I probably need to be more proactive, and that's great. Remember, nothing's ever perfect. And if we can lean a bit more in that balancing act to the proactive side of things, you don't have to be perfect and have 100% proactive. Sometimes things happen, we've got to react to it. That's the ad lib bit I talk about. So don't just write this down and go, oh my goodness, life's terrible. You've made the first step for being aware. So you're well on the way to changing things.
We just had one question, Ross, if you could just explain the difference between the proactive and reactive once more.
Well, yeah, proactive is when you are looking ahead of the game, what's coming up on the horizon. So I use that analogy of driving a car. If you're looking ahead and thinking about work and planning stuff out and deadlines and things you've got to complete, meetings you've got to go to, maybe tests you've got to do, just be prepared, be aware of that, and look at it head on. Don't come away from it. And some people don't see challenges like that. They don't want to see them, or they do see them and they come away from them, make excuses, the avoidance techniques, and then it can blow up, big or small, and that's the reaction to something. And it's almost like we start and then we stop, start and stop. And the top professionals don't start and stop, they flow. And when we can flow, we're thriving. When we're not thriving, we're surviving. And that surviving is a bit of a cliche, but you're probably doing more reactive things to put yourself back on track again. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Good. So what does it really look like? We've looked at a definition there. It's not about being chilled, sitting on your couch and floating through each day, oblivious to what's happening. It's more that we take on the stress and challenges. We need stress to perform to our best, and we deal with it effectively. So people in a work-life harmony have you got these 4 things: a future visualization of positive outcomes, little dwelling in or on the past, maybe some short-term reflection around feedback, personal or other people's. It can be 360, it could just be a line manager, or a clear intent to create action rather than the classic analysis paralysis where you think a great game, but nothing changes. Making lists all the time and not actioning those lists. So I'll put it on for a second longer. If you want to make it simple, let's say it's 100%. And each one of those, if you say yes to it, you've got 25%. Does anybody want to then go in the chat box and tell me what percentage they are? 25, 50, 75 or 100%? You notice how I left out the 0% in there as well. Yeah. Would you like to share what you are, Jenny? Is that professional for me to ask that?
I think I might be 75%.
Okay. Would you like to identify the one we need to work towards a bit more?
Little dwelling in or on the past.
Yeah. It's a good friend, but a bad enemy, So it's like a car driving, and you're driving, and you're looking through the windscreen and the front, it's great. And if you look at the side mirrors, just to reflect and get some feedback, then quickly go back to the front windscreen, that's good. If you spend too long dwelling in the side mirrors, you're going to crash. So I think that's an interesting metaphor, analogy, whatever you want to call it, to get that straight. I think some dwelling is okay. Remember, full point, move on to the next one. Dot, move on to the next one. Dot, move on to the next one. Okay.
I've had a few people comment on analysis paralysis, actually.
Yeah, it's not a bad thing necessarily, but you can spend a lifetime doing that. And there's a term in education called assessment for learning. You've probably come across this, where you do something and the process of doing something informs your next move. You can't do that if you're just analyzing all the time and not making that move and getting the feedback. So whether it's right or wrong, you're getting feedback and you'll do something. It might be a big disaster, but you'll know not to do that again in that way. So that's really important, to actually assessment for learning, to push it forward. That move informs the next one. And quality teachers, as we've got at Kaplan, do that all the time. We have a curriculum, we have a plan, but we tweak it as we go along. Okay. So what does it look like? Again, we're getting down to it. Here's a simple question. When you walk into a room around the blind corner, so somebody can't see you coming, what is the reaction from people when they see you? Yeah. So I'm going to put some on here for you, and you can look at those now.
And are we in any room, Ross, or are we in a work environment?
Well, wherever you want to put your imagination. I
And we're
look at it.
virtual, our virtual room now, we're in Plan B.
Okay.
Yeah.
If I was working in an office and we had a board meeting, as I used to at Preston North End commercial manager, walk to the board meeting, I could almost tell by the reaction to me whether it's going to be a good meeting or not, whether I've produced my budget and they're waiting to hear all the goodies of where I've made the profits, how we've engaged people, how we've moved the club on. And I think, that's important. But if you're feeling you go into a room somewhere and you've got the weight of your world on your shoulders and you're feeling unprepared, it's going to show. And I think you've got to, as a leader, as many of you are going to be leaders, might be leaders now, you've got to show that you have done your preparation, that you are ready for the challenge, you're ready to learn and move on. Colin Powell, he died earlier this year. He was the leader of the forces in Iraq for the Americans. And he said, you can't show people when you're cold or tired or lost. You've got to show them that you're not tired, you're not lost, and you're not cold, because they'll pick up on that. And I think it's the same in working leadership. You've got to, in some ways, put a front on, but you've got to live that front as authentically as you can.
Yeah, we've had a couple of responses so far: excited, happy, a new one, curious.
Yeah, curious to see what they've got today. Yeah, and that's not a bad thing, being curious. So some people, they probably don't get this fully, but they don't know the impact they have in a room sometimes. And I want you to think about that introspectively. Am I having a negative or positive effect on the room? If it's negative, how can I make it more positive? And if it's positive, how can I keep it more positive? Okay, excellent. So the benefits of a work-life harmony, according to Jeff Bezos: more sustained, fruitful, and valued relationships. Relationships is where it's really at. You'll progress consistently. You might have a few blips, but you'll progress. You're able to support others better. And it's a good sign of leadership, that, isn't it? If you don't have enough time or you don't want to support other people, that will eventually come home to roost. And the good leaders always find time to support other people. Be present at both home and work. And a simple example might be reading a story to a child, but being there, not checking your clock, not putting limits on it, being in flow and giving 100% to that person. Differentiate between both environments. You might need a gentler, softer approach at home, although it's not. You might need that at work. But just is the differences you need to employ, and I think that's the cuteness of human behaviour. And you'll get a longer lasting working career, health span and lifespan. So it's not about getting to be the oldest person in the room. It's enjoying that and having less health traumas along the way as well. And another final slide on this one, when you're in sync and symbiosis, you'll deal with stress more effectively. Make friends with it. Use it to improve performance. When you get a few little butterflies, that's a sign your body's ready to perform. It keeps burnout at bay. And the International Classification of Disease of burnout is lack of energy. Yeah. So let me go back a step. So if you're not having this harmony well, you probably have a lack of energy, cynicism and negativity to work or even colleagues, and a poor work efficacy. You're not effective, you're not performing. So if you've got some of those or all of those things, then you probably have got that equation out of kilter somewhat. It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah. And there's a guy called Gabor Mate. I'm going to show you a picture of Gabor Mate. This guy is a naturalized Canadian, is a medical professional. And this book, I've read it a couple of times, and it's right next to me as I'm speaking now. When the Body Says No. And it tells you lots of different things. But one of the main tenets of this is that if we're constantly on alert all the time, ready to perform, ready to do something, to achieve something and be resilient, over time, over years, this could take its effect on you. And you could get to burnout, or you could get to severely compromised health span and lifespan. And it's the chemicals cortisol and adrenaline, when we keep asking to produce them, to perform, to keep push. Everybody's got limits, and you've got to recognize those limits. Coming back to one of our first slides there of awareness. And I think when I read this book, it was a moment for me. It was an epiphany in a way that I thought, I've been pushing for far too long. I need to take a few side steps, maybe a few steps backwards, congratulate myself, self-compassion. And I'm not going to change the world, but if I can change the world of one person, that's a good place to be. So if you ever want to read this book, it's not too intense, it's not too intellectual. That's why I like it. And it gives some good tips as well. It's a good one about avoiding that burnout.
Actually, that might answer. Sharon's asked how to be friends with stress. You know, how can one be friends with stress? We haven't got a huge amount of time today, but maybe that's something we can pick up at the end if we have.
Yeah, well, remind me at the end, because I know you're good at
Yeah.
remembering, because I'm going to give that feedback at the end as well. How do you make friends with stress? Yeah, we'll certainly do that as our first question at the end. So signs that we're in disharmony: procrastination, putting things off, and avoidance, blame and guilt, and helplessness and hopelessness, the two H's. And it's all aimed inward. Yeah, it could be outward to other people, but a lot of it's inward. Knowing when to say yes or no, time management, dread and fear, prejudging something before it happens. That's anxiety. We worry about something that might not even happen. And ultimately, depletion of the self-worth. We're worth something, self-esteem and confidence, not being scared. So if you're feeling one or any or all of those, then that might be a sign that you need to look at that relationship, that work-life harmony, rather than that work-life balance. Okay. So physically, are you having these things then? Okay, so these are some physical changes, and I won't go through them all, but this could be something that we've got this balance wrong. And you might be able to get and survive it for short term, but I can tell you as a man of 60, you can't do this all the time. And it goes back to Gabor Mate talking about putting the body in alert, and we can have some short-term responses that might not be nice, but the short-term responses can be long-term challenges that we might have difficulty dealing with. It comes back to that simple cliche: being in flow, thriving at something rather than just surviving and just getting to the weekend or getting to the end of the day, you know, or getting to a drink if people are drinking. They're all coping mechanisms, whether it's ideological or physical, but they're not good to be sustained long-term. So some things on there to consider and think about. And again, if that prompts a question again, then that's really good for us. Very briefly, there was a woman called Paula Davis who used to be a corporate lawyer. And she was having those symptoms, those physical symptoms, stomach upset, and there's emotional symptoms of, I can't be Paula Davis at work today. And every time I get out of the car, I've got to put on a new persona. I've got to be a bit more ruthless at work. And I've got to maybe fire some people. I've got to be harsh with people. That's the company culture. And she said eventually she couldn't sustain it. So she stopped the job. She took her whole self, as she calls it, into a new job. And the new job was stress awareness and managing burnouts. And now she's even more successful at doing that. And it's what Brené Brown, we talked about Brené Brown recently, about being brave, standing up for what you believe in and being brave. And she did that, and she's reaped the rewards, I'm sure, monetarily, but also emotionally and physiologically. She's feeling much better now. That's when you're at a crossroads. We might not have a crossroads to cross, but if we do, there's our role model for us. Now, this last bit today, I know we've got a few minutes left here, and I want to spend a bit of time talking about study skills. Okay. I spent a long time after 16 when I failed all my qualifications at school, probably because I'm not a whiz kid, but probably because I was playing lots of sport and parents were very flexible with me, which is great. But I didn't get any qualifications. So, and I thought, I'm not stupid. I can pass things. I'm very creative, but I need to be more logical and focused and manage my time better. So I went on a journey for 10 years to study and learn that took me to Leeds, the degree, and kind of do a master's in Saudi Arabia to do some work developing other people's programs, then to Southampton University to teach. And I'm currently doing a PhD. So, and it's interesting, since 16, I've never really failed anything. And again, I'm not super sharp in some classical terms, but I've picked up things that work for me. And I want to share some of those with you now. There was a guy called Jay Cross. I said he could still be alive. I met him about 6 or 7 years ago online, which was unique at that time. Not many people did online stuff. And he won what I'll refer to shortly as the World Memory Championships. He had a fantastically phenomenal memory. And people used to think he has an unfair advantage. He's just got a better memory. But he said, I've had to work at that. And one of the ways he worked at it was not saying extra time means extra knowledge. And he talked about a power hour. So a power hour is like, people have an excuse, this analysis paralysis. I don't have enough time. I can't do it. I'll just wait till it's better. And he said, well, an hour, everybody's got an hour. And you study for 20 minutes. You spend 5 minutes then remembering and retrieving what you learned, and then you relax. Then you start off again, 20-minute study. 5 minutes remembers what you've just learned. Then another 5 minutes remember all of it. And that's why we call it a power hour. And he talks about the process of when you read something, you remember something, you learn it, that's good. But you've got to retrieve it, to remember it, to remember it. That's an even better way of saying it. For you then to establish it in your brain. Yeah. So it's that recapping process that's very powerful. And if you go to the right-hand side of the screen here, if we just learn something, we think we've learned it without retrieving it, remembering it, 25% of that will be lost within 24 hours. So what I've talked to you about today, 25% you'll lose by tomorrow, 50% after 2 weeks, a whopping 75% after a month. Okay, but here's a nice kicker. Disregard this. If you immediately just recap what you've learned, the closer to when it was given, the better. Then touch into it a few days later, and then touch into it a week later, you'll probably have, broadly speaking, generally speaking, a very good retrieval system in place because you've tested what you've learned. So it's a really good thing. I didn't know this. And I used to read for hours, thought I'd known it, but I hadn't. So what I do now, I do the power hour, check it, but I'm very cute. When my motivation's down a bit, or I'm a bit tired, I work with a good friend and she tests me what I've learned in the first 20 minutes, test me the second 20 minutes. And then we do a little bit of that during the week and a little bit the weekend. And before you know it, it's residing in my brain. So there's some really good tips here. And what's happening in the brain is when we get nervous, the amygdala can produce cortisol and adrenaline that can make us less effective to learn, less effective to remember. And okay, that sounds bad, but you know what? The amygdala is good for us. It's looking up and it's saying, right, what's the challenge? And if you see that challenge as exams and you get very nervous about it, then it can produce more bad chemicals. If you see that challenge as a test that's going to help your career and you put it in context of this, I need to do this to progress somewhere, that's good. And driving a car is a good one. I need to drive a car. The world's going to open up for me when I drive a car. So you can use these chemicals, and going back to that question before about stress, thinking about it and visualizing, I need to do this and accept this is going to happen at some point. The hippocampus is a part in the brain, that middle part of the brain, the limbic system, where it's crucial for memory, okay? But what's also crucial for this part is if you're motivated to learn and therefore motivated to remember, as we just pointed out. If you're not motivated to do something, your brain will not remember effectively. It's as simple as that. And you could have a very good memory. I've got, I think, a very good memory. But if I'm not motivated on something, you can tell me something and I've instantly forgotten it. Part of the reason my mind's saying I'm not worth doing this one. And the other reason is I've not retrieved it and remembered it. So anything you do in life, you've got to be motivated and want to do it. The next bit is in the center. Learn how, remember and understand and apply how you learn best. There'll be some people in this audience, and I think, Jenny, you're probably one of these people. You can hear something and probably repeat it back and get a concept in your head and then commit it to paper and run with it. I struggle from just listening about something. I'm very much a doer person. I need to do something, practice, ask me questions, come back, have I got it right? And I ask loads of questions. Then when I've got it right in my head, I'll never forget it. And what I've learned by that is I'm retrieving stuff all the time, but asking direct questions. Because you probably guessed it, I can be quite impatient to learn. Visually, I'm very good. I like to see things and draw things, but I like to do something. And funny enough, in teaching, sometimes there's too much talk and not enough interaction.
Well, on that point, we've got some interaction. So,
oh, sharp.
A really good question from Catherine, actually, about, I suppose, the state of mind we're in at this stage for the power hour. And she's asking, how do you deal with this power hour when you know it's been a long day, you reach home, your brain isn't wanting to take anything more in, and you're mentally exhausted, then how?
Yeah, well, I get underneath the power hour at the bottom, it's got peer power. So I'm a bit tired, a bit less motivated. I might say to Jenny, let's get together. Let's test us on this stuff together. Let's have a nice low calorie cake, have a coffee. I always go for decaf, and make the surroundings, the environment nice. An hour goes so fast in life, and we'll have a little break in the middle, you know, the 5-minute relax, and we'll go again. Before you know it, it'll be over. So get someone to support you. It's really important to do that. Now, that could be doing it with you, or you could be talking to your mum or your dad. Listen, I'm going to do this hour. I'm struggling a bit. If you can get me a cup of tea at some point, or just be downstairs, knowing I'm a bit edgy, and just communicating that awareness we talked about before, you might think, oh, don't worry about it. We'll keep it nice and quiet for you. We'll make sure it's nice and warm. We'll bring you a cake up. And you're queuing people in, being proactive again to get things right. So involve other people. But if you can't do that and you feel really dejected and worn out, okay, don't feel guilty. Park the car, getting it tomorrow, getting it the next day. Only be careful that if you keep procrastinating, that becomes worse than actually doing it sometimes. The top one, being organized. And there's a lot of evidence of when I did some work in schools, secondary schools, that, and we know this already, that from primary school upwards, women, girls perform better at the exams academically than boys across. And the gap, it sort of narrows, but it doesn't come together. So there's a big gap at primary school, slight closing at secondary. You could say, depending which stage you look at, the girls keep that gap as we go older into tertiary education and college and university life. There's many reasons for that, and I'm not going to go into all those now. One of the big reasons is women tend to be organized better than men. They have files and systems and folders, and they can pick things up straight away and find an information. And you'll find with boys, generally speaking, there are going to be exceptions, but when you come to study, this might apply to you fellas, you're into study, you've got your motivation going, you've got your hippocampus going, you're about to start, or you've just started, and you can't find a bit of information. That is just the thing that's going to trip you up to say, I'll do it after Coronation Street, I'll do it after the football. And therein lies a habit that's not a good one. So before you start your power hour, get your files organized, get them ready to go. I can pick it up straight away. I know where it is, whether that's on your computer, physical files in front of you. Women do this much better than men. Prove me wrong and tell me it's different, but that's one for the chat box there, Jenny.
Okay, that might have been controversial, so I'll keep it.
Well, the evidence suggests that it's true. And I've worked with lots of secondary schools and data. There is a gap between boys' learning and girls' academic achievement.
Yeah.
And that gap doesn't close. And it could be to genetics and maturity. And boys want to see something that's relatable to what they're creating, where girls will take it and discuss it and then change it around, then produce it. But organization is the heart of it. And yeah, it's not exclusive. It's not linear that all boys are disorganized and all girls are organized. But if you're well organized in terms of being able to pick something up within a few brief seconds, you've got a better chance of keeping the stimulus and the motivation, the hippocampus going, and reducing the amygdala, the stress hormones. I'll push on. If the questions come, Jenny, please interrupt me.
Will do.
Okay. So, you know, I sometimes work with young people who are going really far places, so maybe approaching university, and we talk about different ways of remembering, and I'll come on to that in a second. But we talk about the motivation. What's your motivation to pass your exams? Where's the evidence you've done this before? And I think something like that just cues you up to say to the hippocampus, this is important, here's the motivation. I've got this written down now. It's up to you, the hippocampus, now to start firing and assist my memory, my learning, and my retrieval. Okay, so I'm going to go through some of these in a practical format in a second, some of the memory techniques now for you. So hold on to your seats. Here we go. The World Memory Championships, they're held every year in the States, and that's where Jay Cross comes in. And one of the ones they have a test. So they put you as a challenger in the room with 100 people, and you've got to remember their names from talking to them. Okay, it sounds really weird, this, but I keep going. 100 people in the room, and you go around, you talk to somebody, and what they do, it's called different ways, but one of the ways is association. So somebody might say, my name's Mr. Jackson, and Mr. Jackson might look like a baker. So this person thinks he's making bread, Jackson, the bread man. And they put associations with each person. They have different ways of doing this. That's just one. I'll come on to different ways in a second. But the example of this slide is to say that the winner, generally speaking, can remember 100 names of strangers within 15 minutes. That is a phenomenal memory, isn't it? So you're spending, seconds with each person, finding their name out, putting it in your memory box. It's phenomenal. And it scares me to think about it. But it also excites me. I could use this in a room somewhere. Hello, Mr. Jackson, nice to meet you. It's okay, turn around. Hello, Jim, how you doing? This guy's on the ball, yeah? Another one is that we get lots of facts in life, and these are 80 facts, about David Robert Joseph Beckham. And you look at that now and you say, for the neck, I'll never be able to remember all that. It puts me off straight away. The hippocampus is retreating, the amygdala is producing the chemicals. Then you're thinking as men, what's the point in doing this? Why do I need to do it? And you're switching off straight away. Even the actual text and font style is switching you off, yeah? Ain't we getting excited about that? No is the answer, yeah? But then if we put this into different mind maps, for instance, and I do mind maps with associations. So I'm going to just stop this for a second, because we promised you would do, and I'm going to prove something to you. I've got no notes in front of me, so I'll try and look at the camera so you know I'm doing that. But I learned this about 10 years ago, sad facts about David Robert Joseph Beckham, born May the 2nd, 1975 in Leytonstone, London. He went to Chase Lane Primary and Chingford Foundation. His dad's called Ted, who was a kitchen fitter. His mum called Sandra. She was a hairdresser. He's got a sister called, two sisters called Joanne and Lynn. He's married to Victoria Beckham. He's got 4 kids, Brooklyn, Romeo, Cruz and Harper. He started playing for Brimsdown Rovers when he was younger, and then he went to play for trials for Tottenham and Man United, South Man United when he was 14. I can go on and on and on playing, and I will do shortly. But I've just recited about 25 facts to you, and I'm looking at anything. In fact, I find it quite boring saying it. So my amygdala and chemicals, I need to fire a bit more because I'm not performing enough. But I'm certainly motivated with the hippocampus to prove to you I can remember something. Somebody who failed all his qualifications at 16, right? So let's go back to the presentation then. And you don't have to thank me for that, but it's okay. So if you look at this here, I just did the early years and family then, and I went to junior football. So yeah, again, about 25 facts. I could go on to the other bits, which I will do shortly. So, this is David Beckham. People say it's not relevant. Okay, but there is stuff that's relevant. And I think mind mapping and associations are very important. So I'm going to do the associations now. I've mentioned that word 3 times now. So association means when I'm trying to remember David Robert Joseph Beckham, I think of doctor, the D and the R, doctor. Dr. Joseph Beckham. So I remember it is Joseph. 2575, like a train, 2575. And that's the date of birth. He's chasing the lane to get to the Chingford Foundation. Keep with me. When I think of Ted and Sandra, the Londoners, so I think of a southern accent and I put the accent Ted and Sandra, it reminds me straight away that they're in the kitchen and he's a kitchen fitter and she's cutting his hair. Yeah, strange, I know, but keep with me. Joanne and Lynn, his sisters, I think of J-Lo, Joanne and Lynn. Victoria Beckham, I won't go any deeper about that one, but her kids, I call it Brooke, B-R-C-H, Brooklyn, Romeo, Cruz and Harper. So I don't even think about the names, I just go Brooke, and that's an acronym I use to remember them. And then I think about David Beckham being cool. He's got a hat on, his brim's down, so he's nice and cool. And he's Leyton Orient. I didn't mention Norwich, but sometimes he's looking out from London across to Norwich. And Bobby Charlton and Tottenham at 11, South United at 14. Okay, I hope I'm not boring you too much now, but that's the way, the sillier ways. And what we know from memory, the sillier ways you remember something, the more it resonates with you. So singing, voices, silly names, silly images can be very powerful. And I think it's something that I've learned to do for myself now. Okay, so I hope I've not bored you too much with that. So if we move on a little bit, those are the things that I focused on. And what I did with this, going back to the context of the Power Hour, I did it, I retrieved it, I tested myself again, I moved on to this one. Did it, retrieved it, then went back to this one. So I make sure it's consolidating all the time. And I think that's the secret. And then I'll do it a few days later, then maybe a week later. And then I know I just have to touch up on it now and again. So that's power hour into practice and that retrieval process. There's one called Simonides of Greece, and he talked about a memory palace. So if you want to remember something, think about a familiar house where the rooms are, and you go into each room in the house, sorry, and it reminds you of different things. So if I go into this red front door, Man United front door, and I can have a number on the door, that number is not relevant, but it could be his number 7 on his shirt to remember it. I go into left-hand side where it says 2007, and that could be when he left his first team he played for in Spain, and he went from Real Madrid up to Galaxy, LA Galaxy. So let's go back a second for you. LA Galaxy, I think about going up some stairs. So he's going up the stairs. He played for LA Galaxy for 2 years. In 2009, he played for 2 loan spells at AC Milan. So AC, the guy's in the toilet, because another name for a toilet is WC. So I have a connection with AC, WC. And 2013, he goes to play for Paris Saint-Germain, and he plays, his fee donates to charity. And in that, one of my other diagrams, I put a chair in the room because chair is charity. Yeah. And 96 is when he made his England debut, 115 appearances, and 21 when he was there, made his first appearance. So I can put different images, I can put different associations, different numbers in there to help remember something. Now you might think that's a bit weird, but it actually works very well. And the idea is for you to find out what works for you. So let's have a quick summary then. Do you work at the expense of home life or work life and live in perpetual fear? Okay. Do you have work-life harmony? Being aware of being proactive to strike a good, consistent harmony? Do you deal effectively with frequency, intensity, and duration of stress, and ultimately create a COVID win-win scenario? Do you visualize positive future outcomes? Get excited about it. I'm certainly excited about 60 onwards because I know my best years are ahead of me. And I'm constantly polishing what I do to find out the person I can become. I don't dwell on the past too much. Remember the car mirrors. I use some reflection and feedback, and I always adopt action, not always analysis paralysis, because we've got the assessment for learning. What is the audience response when you walk the room or around the blind corner? And the more relaxed I am, and that's not relaxed sitting on the couch, relaxed, done my work, I'm chilled, the more people come towards me. And you'll find that in life, in inside work and outside work, when you're easygoing, you can absorb, and you're not at capacity point, people gravitate towards you. Are you an effective learner? You'll have to put some work in, you'll have to motivate, you'll have to identify your motivation, but find out the different techniques of mind maps, acronyms. We didn't talk much about acronyms. Holmes is one, the lakes of North America, Huron, Ontario, Michigan, Erie, Superior. Every good mother deserves favor, and there's different ones for the planets as well as the music one. So acronyms and mnemonics are very powerful, and I'm hoping to do a session on this in the new year. So those are some things about what we did today. Very fast, very powerful, but I've stopped it because we've got some questions and a little competition for my book. So I'm going to go to the last slide there, Jenny. Then I'm going to ask for the questions now.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ross. We packed a lot in, but I think people will remember there's variety there. So thank you for covering so much there in harmony. We have 2 questions. One actually I think we'll probably cover in 2022. It sounds a long way away, but it isn't, is it? About other memory techniques. So I think there's a demand there for some more on that. Somebody who isn't necessarily a visual learner saying other ways of recall. So we'll come
very briefly. It's about a menu of choices. I'll provide the menu of choices. You decide what food you like. Yeah,
brilliant. Somebody's asked if there are any books that you can recommend to boost memory and visualization.
Yeah, there's lots that I've used over the years. What I'll do, I'll in the other room, I've got all my books. I'm going to pick out a few of those, and I'll send you a couple of links to them. But I think for memory, the shorter the book, the probably better it is for you. It's less of a barrier. So there's some really good ones on memory techniques that I've used from Barry Heimer and Steve and Mike Greer. So I'll look at those and I'll send you a visual link to them. Okay, an email to Jenny, and you can send that visual stuff through.
Yeah, I shall do. I think Darren Brown writes really well on memory.
Well, he does it more of
well.
a show business style.
It is a show, but some interesting techniques about walking around the room and attaching labels to things, a bit like you've done
that's
today.
What the world memory champions do. And if somebody's got some white dust on the shoulder, you know, he thinks maybe he's got dandruff, and he thinks about something to do with that. And you've got to practice it. You can be unique in the way you think, but you've got to practice retrieving it, which is the secret of that.
Yeah. And there's one other question, and just before I ask it, I'm going to put the survey into the chat now, because my question actually to everybody is, we've run 4 of these now since September, and we'd really like to know what you would like us to do on personal development in 2022. And so we've got a survey which I'm just putting into the chat for everyone. It's only 6 questions. Really would welcome your feedback on the session and what you might want to see in the future, so that we can provide other things for you. So please do that. The other point is, the next one we're running is on January the 19th, on your best year yet, which tunes into New Year's resolutions. And then the question to you, Ross, is, the last one we've probably got time for, is, can you learn to be more organized?
You can, and I'm living evidence of that. I've just put in Tony Buzan. He's like the godfather of memory techniques, so that's a good reference point. They're not expensive, but you can learn. It's up to you to find out which ways you learn best, and I think that's the bit of a journey for you. You might have a precondition, you learn best in a certain way, but what you need to do is expose yourself to different ways, because as we get older, we change. And you might find what was good when you were younger is not as good now, and vice versa. So I'm a good example of improving your memory. It can relate to sleep, it can relate to foods, it can relate to exercise, but we know this much. When we're relaxed in who we are, knowing where we are and where we're going, the memory works better. If we're in that frightened state, it's very difficult to access the hippocampus. It's got to be motivating, it's got to be relaxed. If it's not relaxed, the adrenaline and cortisol come flooding in and sabotage you. Like building a sandcastle on the beach, the tide comes in and washes it all away.
We've had a couple of people, Ross, thank you for that, who said they missed previous sessions and would like to have the recordings. So I'll see if we can get those out to you. If anyone doesn't have them but wanted them, I'm just sharing.
Yes.
And our marketing team will be able to help with that as well. Ross, we've got a couple of minutes left.
Yeah, yes, please do. Ask me questions, observations.
So, yeah, any other comments wanting to come through from anyone? That sounded like a seance. I didn't mean it to be like that. Sorry.
What
but a nice thank you for Eloise. Said she's got to leave now, but found that really, really interesting.
Yeah. And, you know, we're about at Kaplan here when I'm working with you guys, is taking it slowly, you know, and it's not as if I want to overwhelm you. Taking it slowly, dipping into what you like, asking the questions, and then you'll inform the sessions, you know, beyond next year. And we've had some good responses from the webinars. I do like doing some smaller group coaching as well, understanding what's holding people back, because I think everybody wants to improve, whether they know it or not, whether they can articulate it or not. I think that's true. Thanks, Balls 7808.
Yeah, somebody's asked about motivation, struggling to. I've had two struggling questions actually. Let's take both of them, and then we'll probably need to call it a day. One is any quick tips on motivation, and the second is any quick tips on switching off from work after work.
Motivation or willpower. Willpower is finite, so you can't have willpower 24/7, 7 days a week every year. And we know that it's very difficult to deny yourself something. So if we're going to talk about diets, you should never rule out your favorite foods, because you just deny yourself to actually have an inevitable crash where you go and binge on something. So, you know, if you like chocolate, but you want to diet, have chocolate as a treat occasionally, but don't deny yourself, because it wears the willpower away. And you know, the willpower, it can come and go from hour to hour, day to day, week to week. And it's knowing when you're in a good position for that willpower. You know, when I'm quite tired, but I feel guilty, I don't revise like I used to. Yeah. So I'll do it when I'm feeling good. I line it up, I clear my diary, I make sure I do it, and I don't procrastinate. And there are moments where, you know, I struggle a little bit, but I push on through gently, knowing that I've got the best window of opportunity to do it. So don't fight that motivation, that willpower, because you've only got a limited amount. And therefore, food, with lots of experiments on food and willpower, giving that glucose to your body is very important. Yeah. And hydration.
Yeah.
And the other question was about, you said about, was it reflection and things of that nature in the second part of that?
We had motivation and memory techniques. I'm just going to say something else actually quickly.
Yeah.
Lots of people are putting their email addresses in the chat. So if you want to do that to me directly as a panelist, that's probably better. They're going to everyone. So just send those to me. That would be great. Thank you. Sorry, Ross.
Yeah, the second part of the question, Jenny, we're talking about memory techniques. Was it about self-care and reflection?
Yeah, and how do you switch off after work was the question.
Yeah, you know what? It should be easy, and it can be easy, but often it's not easy. But I look at it this way. If I don't start switching off or going a bit slower, how can I speed up the next day? But I think more at my age now, if I'm on alert all the time, it's going to wear me out that much quicker. So it's like a battery. I can do it and use it, but I need to recharge it. And if I don't recharge it now, I can get that point where I'm feeling a bit not 100% physiologically, decision making, maybe procrastinating, maybe prophesying things, categorizing things into the worst case scenario, that catastrophization. So understanding that your body, you know, be proactive. Don't let the body tell you to slow down or change. Keep your money in the bank. And when I say that, I mean, keep it in a credit rather than debit with your body. Look after it and it'll look after you, especially the memory.
Yeah, that's good advice. And actually, we've had so many requests in to the hosts and panelists now for the recordings that seems to be that lots and lots of people want them. So what I'm going to do is, rather than send individual emails to or 90 people so far, I'm going to get those out to you with the recording for this session from our marketing team. So you'll have all 4 together, and then that's probably the most efficient way of doing it. Lovely comments coming in with people thanking for that session. So I'm going to thank Ross. That was brilliant. So much for us to learn. I always do learn so much from you, and it's an opportunity for us all to reflect, actually. And I'm going to spend 5 minutes now recapping in my mind the tips you've shared with us. And lots of people are echoing that as well in the chat. So thank you.
Yeah, I do apologize for overloading a little bit, but I know you're capable and you can dissect it later on and come back.
I know we've got some marvelous apprentices and brilliant professionals with us in this call. So thank you for everyone for joining. Wish you a really good holiday and a proper break from work to get some harmony and back in the Jeff Bezos way. And we look forward to seeing you with us at our next session in January. So thanks so very much for joining. I'll start the recording now.
Good. That was nicely